Hi there, welcome back to The Perspective. I'm Blaise Hope with Douglas Broderick, the Resident Coordinator for the United Nations in Indonesia. Tell me about the future.
Well, the future in Indonesia looks bright, but there's a lot of things that we need to work on. One thing that is very good and happening is Indonesia has 1,500 disasters a year. The capacity of the Indonesian Emergency Response Agency, BNPB, has been excellent, and we've been working very hard with them over the years, obviously before the tsunami of 2004, in terms of addressing and having local capacity at the district levels, at the provincial levels, in terms of responding to disasters. Obviously, disasters impact and affect poor people the most. And that's something that we all need to keep in mind. And the government agencies and the UN, we work hand in hand, especially with OCHA, the UN Humanitarian and Response Agency, to respond to those needs and emergencies. And that's something that we all need to be aware of in terms of preparedness, unfortunately, for the next disaster, and also the way that all of us together and the government capacities respond to such emergencies in the future. I think we all know that living on the ring of fire, we have to be prepared every day for an emergency. And obviously emergencies affect over 1.5 million Indonesian citizens directly per year on average. And those people we need to help because they're the most vulnerable and the most poor. Another challenge in the future that we want to work with and have, Indonesia has had a long peacekeeping history. I think you're well aware that in the past Indonesia has sent troops to many UN peacekeeping missions around the world. It started in 1959 in the Sinai. Indonesia right now has the 16th most largest amount of contingents of peacekeepers to the UN. We're working very, very hard with the Peacekeeping Center at Sentul, the Ministry of Defense and TNI to ensure that we try to get Indonesia in the top 10 of the UN peacekeeping forces around the world. And that's something that's very important in terms of helping Indonesia and working together with Indonesia in terms of global aspirations. Another thing that is concerning us is that we are trying to work with government, and we do have some beginning programs on that, on internet safety and internet guidelines for children. I think you're well aware in today's cyber world that many, many children are exposed, especially through mobile devices, to the good aspects of the internet in terms of doing education and doing their homework, but also there's other more dark side of the internet. So we're working with government in terms of developing guidelines, advocacy points, and ways that children can use the internet safely, especially with parental guidance and school guidance in the future. And that's something very important because, as you know, Indonesia is growing and exploding in terms of internet penetration and internet usage. And we want to be sure that children have very good safety and security on that. And we've had discussions with the Ministry of Information and Technology on this kind of guidelines and procedures, and something that we want to work on very clearly as the UN, including from UNICEF and ITU, to help Indonesia with this challenge.
Is this effort special to Indonesia, or are there parallels elsewhere?
No, there's many parallels. The best thing that the UN can do is we can bring global examples and lessons learned from other countries to Indonesia, but also we can share the lessons that Indonesia has. Indonesia has a tremendous amount of capacities, especially on emergency response, especially on conflict management, especially on emergency for tsunamis, and we have an exchange on that. So obviously internet guidelines and procedures come from other countries, but we also can share what Indonesia has done to the world. So we bring the world to Indonesia, and we bring Indonesia to the world in terms of what we work on in SouthSouth Cooperation. And that's another aspect.
Sorry, SouthSouth
Cooperation.
Can you explain that?
SouthSouth Cooperation is the sharing of knowledge between countries, of lessons learned and examples learned. Like, for instance, with Myanmar came down to Indonesia, and we shared with them how Indonesia worked solving conflict. You know, we're all aware that Indonesia has tremendous experience and expertise in solving conflicts. There were many different conflicts here. There's about 13 hotspots that, you know, have been areas that are concerned for the government. And there has been a comprehensive approach to these areas in terms of solving conflict. So we had a Myanmar delegation come here to Indonesia to share that with our Myanmar colleagues, which is a very important, what we call SouthSouth Exchange, a country exchange at a simple level on various things. We also had exchanges in terms of police work between the Afghan police coming to Indonesia to learn how they deal with citizens and village protection as a police force in conflict areas, and something that the Afghanistan police could take back and use in their country. So it's a very key aspect for us in the future in our partnership, in our relationship with the government, to share those lessons and bring the world to Indonesia and bring Indonesia to the world.
All right, well, we've got to hold there. We'll be back in just a moment with part 5 of The Perspective.